We are continuing to follow all of the developments and any details regarding the missing persons case of Nancy Guthrie. That search is entering week 3. We know that law enforcement also combing through several evidence that has been gathered. They have been gathering more potential evidence as the search does continue for the 84-year-old who is the mother of Today Show host Savannah Guthrie. Now, she was last seen at her Arizona home back on January 31st and was reported missing the following day. Authorities say her blood was found on the front porch and purported ransom notes were sent to news outlets, but 2 deadlines for paying those ransoms have since passed. Authorities have expressed concern about Nancy Guthrie's health because she needs vital daily medicine. Joining us now to talk about where this investigation stands and what police and sheriff's officers and really FBI agents are going to do going forward in this search is going to be Roberto Villaseñor. He is a former Tucson police chief. Roberto, good to see you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Of course. You have been following this case very closely. As someone who has worked in the area for several years and also has the mind of an investigator and someone who was a former police chief in Tucson, what sticks out to you most from this case?
Well, I think at this point, just the sheer volume of this case and the magnitude of the amount of work that investigators have to do on the ground is it's enormous. I've not seen anything like this before. What I heard is they have over 30,000 tips that they need to follow up on. Now, that doesn't mean that every tip is perfect or anything. You have some that are just absolutely, you could throw out, space aliens and stuff, but the majority of them are going to be things that you just have to follow through on. You can't ignore any tip because you don't know what's going to provide you with the information that you're going to need to get a break in the case. And so you try and work together with all your partners, both local and federal. I think you saw, in fact, you covered with the operation that occurred a couple nights ago. You saw many different agency vehicles there. You saw Oro Valley, Marana, Tucson was there, Pima County Sheriffs, and all the federal agencies as well. And luckily here in Tucson, we do have a great working relationship between all the local and federal agencies. And so it's good to see that they're still continuing that and they're working together to try and solve this case.
Let's talk a little bit about the sheer volume of tips that police have received. It's something that sticks out to you from this case as a whole. I mean, we're talking about tens of thousands of people calling in, trying to provide information, and as investigators are continuing this search, how do these individual departments handle that sheer volume of tips coming in from the public, and how are priorities shifted with each piece of information that they get?
You've hit on such an important part of this investigation because it is such an enormous triage operation to try and identify those that, there's going to be duplicate tips. There's going to be tips that really may key on information they already have and give more credence to those tips. And they try and identify those quickly, assign them to people to follow up on. In addition, they've been back out to the scene several times. That could be as a result of something that came in on a tip. They had the operation, which they said came about as a tip from the public. So the public's involvement in this is enormous, but it's also quite daunting to the investigators and people who are working the investigation on scene.
I want to put up some footage here, Roberto, of just kind of the scene around Nancy's home. I'm also going to get up some images from the terrain there in Tucson, because something else you can offer us as a unique perspective, again, is really how this works down there on the ground in Tucson. So what unique geographic or environmental challenges are investigators facing right now as they search parts of this area?
Well, the countryside here in Arizona and Tucson is quite rough. It's desert. It's full of a lot of, cactus, different brush. Things could have blown in and be hidden under brushes, hidden under cactus. There's wildlife that are surrounding the residents. You can see there, it's quite open. You're going to have all types of things that could come in and disturb the evidence in crime scene. And so you need to be very thorough, and something that maybe wasn't there the day before could actually show up by wind or animal or something the next day. Or it could have been that it's uncovered by wind or something. And so you need to just keep going over that. And when you've reached now the 3rd week, I think that you said, you can't just say, well, we've been there once and that's it. It's always good to go back with fresh eyes. If you don't have anything else to follow up on, or if a tip gives you something else to follow up on. It's not a bad thing to go back to the scene with maybe some fresh eyes to look at it. Maybe someone else will spot something that you didn't. In the meantime, this is all going on with just a tremendous amount of news media presence. You have to be very conscious of the integrity of the investigation. And that's why I think they put up tents, they've used sheets to kind of shield some of the activity that's going on there. And I don't think it's just because they're trying to be secretive, but they're probably trying to preserve evidence that maybe they've found, or they also need to preserve information that only investigators need to know and the suspect. If everyone knows everything, then it's going to be hard to winnow out the suspect that come in or people that want to come in and say they know more than they really do.
I'm glad you mentioned the fact that a lot of these investigators are going back out there. We're entering week 3, but they have been back out there recently trying to get more evidence, trying to gather more information, because a lot of the questions do continue to be, well, why are they back out there now? I mean, they were there the first day, but as you mentioned, you kind of have to keep combing through that area just in
Right.
case something were to pop up. Let's go back to the fact that this is such a high profile case. When you were with your department there at Tucson Police, and also just when we talk about best practices as a whole, how do departments deal with trying to be transparent for the public and release key information that could help them find a suspect versus not giving everything away and potentially hurt the case?
It's a very fine line that the department has to walk because today's society is really demanding information all the time. And sometimes they're demanding things they really should not have privy to that would hurt the investigation. And so you have to work with the investigators, either it's the head of the agency or the spokesperson for the agency needs to work closely with the investigators, talk to them about what can we release that would not jeopardize the investigation, but maybe give the public information that could help them in providing us tips or saying, oh, that reminds me of someone or something that I saw, and I should call and let them know about it. So that's why they really encourage anything you know about this, anything that you saw about this, and check your cameras, check your video, whatever you may have, could be something that is beneficial to the case. But the investigators can't release something that would hurt them later on if they're able to make an arrest and try it in court, and it would jeopardize their information.
Want to put it back up here on the screen, just some of the images that were released by the FBI. This is the surveillance footage of this potential suspect that they're still looking for. And I just want to remind everyone that at this time, no one has been named as a suspect or a person of interest in this case. Some people have been detained, but they have since been released. And Roberto, let's go to the coordination between all of these different agencies. So when you bring in federal agencies like the FBI into a location to work with a sheriff's department, like the Pima County Sheriff's Office, how are all of those responsibilities divided up? But also, when local agencies take part in an investigation like this, such as the Tucson Police Department?
Really, they should work in cooperation. It's not so much as a division of labor, but rather an enhancement of labor, a synergy that should occur when the different agencies bring in their special expertise into the situation. Watching this video, it's very alarming as to someone took such great care to conceal themselves. There's obviously a lot of planning that has taken place, but there's also some mistakes that they're going to make. I think that your station has already broadcast the information you've been able to develop on where did the backpack come from? Where did the holster come from? What about the jacket? All of them have this nexus of Walmart, it seems. And so that's a good way to start. Okay, let's start checking the Walmarts for purchases that occurred. People don't think about this, but there's ways to track behavior. There's ways to backtrack people's activity, either through purchases, credit card, information, people on camera that were captured in the store video and surveillance things. So there's ways to make this information valuable for the investigators, and they each try and provide their expertise to accomplish that.
The fact that we are entering week 3 and that the public wants to know so much information, there is also a sense that obviously, in regards to an investigation like this, a lot of things are happening behind the scenes. And the public can't really be made aware of all of those happenings just so that we don't hurt the case, just like how I've been mentioning. Can you think of any case that you have worked with in the past from your time in law enforcement that has some sort of similarities to this? A missing persons case, it's high profile, there's a lot of attention all around the country, the world, even at this point. And what resolution was there to that case? How long did it take to resolve?
Oh, well, you're taking me back to one of the difficult moments of my time as chief. We had a young girl, Isabel Celis, that was taken from her home, middle of the night, very similar. And unfortunately, we did not resolve that case until we received information that led us to the individual who had abducted her and ultimately killed her, along with another young girl. And it is just terrified to work those type of cases and not be able to bring resolution quickly, but you never give up. We had people working on that for years, and I don't believe the actual resolution came until maybe 6 or 7 years later. I was retired by the time that they actually apprehended the person responsible for that case. But it also had national attention. We had all the national news media out there, and it was a very difficult situation to try and provide information so that people knew what was going on, but not jeopardizing the case. And we were able to successfully do that.
Roberto, I do apologize for bringing you back to that moment. It was tough. Obviously, when you work these cases, they do affect the officers that are there on the ground trying to solve them. And, hopefully we get a resolution to this missing persons case quickly and that everything does turn out well and that Nancy's alive. She can go
Yes.
back to her family. But that kind of brings me to my next point, which is how are officers and investigators also supported, even emotionally, when they're handling a situation like this?
Well, we do, as agencies, provide behavioral health for the officers and investigators because you're right. This is traumatic for them. They get invested in these cases and they work really intensely on this, and it becomes really the focus of their lives in some ways. So we provide peer counseling. I'm hopeful that many officers have faith, that guide them and help them through that. I know I do, and I know that everything is in God's hands, and I hope that they have a method to try and deal with the stress and the anxiety that is presented in these cases because they do become the focus of their their job and what they try and do, and it's very traumatic for them. And I feel very close to them and hopeful that they're getting the help that they need.
Roberto, my final question for you would be, what do you think is most important, most critical at this time to make a breakthrough in this case? And really, what's the most important thing that not just the public, but even investigators should be focusing on to try to get it resolved?
I don't know if there's really any most important thing. I think that the public needs to keep sending in tips if they have them, valid tips, and then the investigators just strengthen resolution to go forward and to keep logging on those tips. But anything could be the most important thing. At this point, you don't know exactly what is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back, so to speak, and what is going to bring about resolution. I'm sure you're going to see further police activity on this. When tips come in, they investigate them. I believe the sheriff has said that. Don't be surprised at that. If we have something that comes in and we feel it's warranted for us to follow up, you may see additional, warrants obtained and residents secured and people stopped. That doesn't mean that every single one is getting you the suspect, but they're people they need to talk to because they're following up on tips that they felt had some validity. And so they need to treat everything as probably some of the most important information because they can't ignore or deny any of the information until they know what they have.
Roberto Villaseñor, the former police chief for the police department in Tucson, Arizona. We appreciate your time here at Live Now from Fox just to talk about this case that still has a lot of attention, and we're still searching for Nancy at this time. You take
Yes.
care.
Thank you.
Of course. We do want to step away for a quick commercial break. Before I do so, though, I'm going to put back up some footage of Nancy because this search is entering week 3 today. After she was first reported missing back on February 1st, she went missing on a Saturday. That was January 31st. Just a reminder also that the FBI has released surveillance videos of a masked person wearing a handgun holster outside of Guthrie's front door. I'm going to put up some of those images here on your screen. Now, last Thursday, the FBI called the person a suspect. It described him as a man about 5 feet 9 inches tall with a medium build. The agency said he was carrying a 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack backpack. Also, investigators are collecting DNA from Guthrie's property, which does not belong to Guthrie or those in close contact with her, according to the Pima County Sheriff's Department. And the Sheriff's Department and FBI also announced phone numbers and a website to offer tips. Several hundred detectives and agents have been assigned to the case, again, according to the Sheriff's Department. Now, the FBI says it has collected more than 13,000 tips since February 1st, the day Guthrie was reported missing. And the Sheriff's Department, meanwhile, said it has taken at least 18,000 calls. Late Friday night, law enforcement sealed off a road about 2 miles from Guthrie's home as part of their investigation. A parade of sheriffs and FBI vehicles, including forensics vehicles, passed through that roadblock as well. Investigators also tagged and towed a Range Rover SUV from a nearby Culver's restaurant parking lot late on Friday. The Sheriff's Department said on Saturday that the activity was part of the Guthrie investigation, but no arrests were made. Any new information or break in this case, we will bring it to you here at LiveNOW from Fox.